Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Josh Nelson, acting on behalf of the Service Desk Institute today, and I'm super excited because we have Frank Abagnale with us. And that may be a name that sounds familiar to many of you, but I want to give Frank the opportunity here to introduce himself. So, Frank, would you take that, please, and just kind of let us know who you are?
Yeah, most people, of course, know me from the movie Catch Me If You Can, which was Steven Spielberg's adaptation of my life at my early age in my teens. Obviously, that was many, many years ago. The last 48 years, I've been teaching at the FBI Academy. I've taught for 48 years at the FBI Academy in their field offices in the United States, having taught two generations of FBI agents. I am also the proud father of an FBI agent who's celebrating 18 years in the Bureau. And I've also conducted more than 3,000 seminars around the world on cybercrime, identity theft, fraud, check forgery, counterfeiting. But most of all, and most proud of all, that I've been married to my one and only wife for 48 years and have three sons, eight grandchildren. And that's the most proudest part of my life.
That's amazing. It's great to know what happened next, right? I did enjoy the movie, but it's fantastic to hear what happened next. Got a couple questions here that I'm very curious to learn about. So the recent scattered spider cyber attack on the MGM group in Las Vegas apparently started with social engineering of an IT help desk operative. Um, you used similar methods in the 1960s. Are you surprised that they're still effective?
Not at all, because social engineering actually has been around for a couple of hundred years. And I, of course, was 16 years old when I walked by a hotel and saw an airline crew come out and had a uniforms on. And I thought to myself, wow, if I could get one of those uniforms, how powerful would that be when I go into a bank to cash a check? And as I walked up further, I came to the Pan Am building and I thought to myself, this would be the perfect airline to use. So the next day, I placed a phone call to Pan Am's executive corporate offices and asked to speak to someone in purchasing. And I didn't know what I was going to say, but when they answered, I just said, look, my name is John Black. I'm a co-pilot with the company, been with the company 7 years, never had this come up before. What's the problem? Well, we flew a trip in here last night, sent my uniform out through the hotel to have it dry cleaned. Now the dry cleaner of the hotel said they can't find it, have a flight in about 5 hours. He gave me all the information of where to go, what to fill out to get a new uniform. And back then, that was social engineering. I was 16 years old and didn't know what social engineering was. But at the same token, the only device I had was a land phone. Today, of course, you have the internet, you have text messages, you have emails, you have all kinds of forms of communication in order to social engineering someone. And really, the only answer to social engineering is education. You have to educate the person on the other end that they're being socially engineered. People are basically honest, thank God, but because they're honest, they don't have a deceptive mind. So when I call the bank, it is easy for me to start to turn that conversation around if that individual at the bank doesn't know that I'm social engineering them. So this is why to really defeat social engineering, you have to absolutely educate the person on the other end they're being socially engineered. So it still goes on today, 50 years later, and probably will continue to go on even with modern technology.
Well, that's fascinating. And it does bring me to a next logical question. Do you think that modern technology makes a criminal's life easier today, especially with things
Yeah,
like Gen AI? Go ahead.
absolutely. I've said it for years. What I did 50 years ago in my youth is 4,000 times easier to do today. Technology breeds crime. It always has, always will. There'll always be people willing to use technology in a negative, self-serving way. So back in the old days, for me to make credentials, I had to sit there and do paste and cut copies with a Xerox machine. Today, I can create any type of credential online with AI, whether it be a passport, credentials to open a bank account, credentials to get me into a site. And that's just the beginning. So we've gone from being able to create these credentials on your computer using just simply graphics now to AI, which allows me to do it so much easier. Not to mention that I can replicate just about anything with the use of AI. So as time goes by, and it's a surprise even to me 50 years later, but every year crime just gets easier. And of course, we try to provide customer service and convenience And when we do that, we also provide the opportunity to make it easier for criminals to defraud us.
Wow. So what can companies do then? What solutions are there to help protect from these types of attacks?
Well, I've worked with a company called Trusona, and I've worked with them for over 20 years. I'm not an employee of theirs. I simply sit on their board of advisors. And Trusona has developed some great technology over the past 20 years, but I think the best thing they've ever done is a new technology called ATO Protect. And I truly mean this with sincerity. It is probably the best technology I've seen in the last 50 years. And this allows me the ability to identify the person on the other end of the device with 99.9% accuracy and doing it under a minute and sometimes 30 seconds. And that technology doesn't require integration. It's very simple to use. It's not very costly. And ATO has taken off. And I think when you develop any type of technology, you develop it for one reason, and then you find that there are thousands of reasons that people need to identify the person on the other end of the device. When I teach, I always explain to people I have three philosophies I teach on: prevention, verification, education. Prevention, because once you lose your money, you will probably never get your money back. They may arrest the person, they may convict them, they may send them to prison, but it's highly unlikely you'll recover your money. Second, verification, because today anything can be replicated, duplicated, deep fake, counterfeited, AI. So before you part with any money, you absolutely need to know who's on the other end of that device. And finally, education, just like we're doing today, education is the most powerful tool to fighting crime. So if you understand how the scam works, you will not fall victim to that scam.
It's very interesting. You mentioned Trusana. I believe they'll be presenting at an upcoming webinar that we have going on November 14th at 2 p.m. So very excited to learn more about that. This has been incredibly informative, Frank. One of the things, though, we always love to do is also have some fun, right? So I'm curious, can you share a fun story about your experiences on the movie?
One of the things that amazed me, and Steven Spielberg actually shot this, but he never allows the release of things he's taken and taken out of the film. They were at Kennedy Airport filming a scene in the old TWA terminal where basically I had posed as a security guard and stood in front of a night security box and put a sign over the box saying box was out of order to leave deposits with security guard. And people actually did that 50 years ago when I did it. But when they were filming it, here was at least 100 film crew people, boom cameras, boom mics, lights everywhere. And Leo standing in front of the night security box at the airport is in his uniform, security guard uniform. And he's waiting for them to say, go ahead, action, and shoot the scene. And this woman walks up with her night deposit and hands it to Leo. And she explains to her that we're actually making a movie here. This is not real. And then he yelled out to Steven Spielberg, see, that's how he got away with it. So it's just amazing to me.
Wow. And talk about just still seeing how relevant being aware of these things are today. Social engineering worked back then, still works today, even on a movie set.
Exactly.
Oh, Frank, this has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you for taking the time out today. Is there anything else that you might want to wrap up with, or?
I just to give you a little history about Ori Eisen, the founder of Trusona. I actually met him over 20 years ago. He was the corporate director worldwide for security for American Express. They were having problems with counterfeit cards and counterfeit travelers' checks. And he would tell me over lunch ideas he had for technology and things that he could create. And I really encouraged him to leave American Express and go develop those technologies. So one day he called me and said, if I do that, will you be my advisor? Because the truth is, I'm not a criminal. I can't think like you. I can develop anything, but I don't have your mind. And if you'll agree to do that, I'll leave and start doing that. And we developed the 41st parameter. We sold it to Experian for $365 million. We developed the passkey, which is now in 4.5 billion phones around the world, and now ATO Protect. But in an interview a number of years ago in Hong Kong, an MSNBC reporter asked Mr. Eisen, I understand you work with Frank Abagnale, but Frank Abagnale doesn't write code. He said, no, Frank doesn't write code, but I'm not a criminal. So I play chess with Frank. I develop something, I show it to Frank, and he says, let me explain to you how I'll beat this. Then I go back and I fix that, and he comes back and says, this is good, but I could still access it this way. Until the day Frank tells me this is extremely good and very difficult to break, that's when I put it in the marketplace. I remind people all the time that there is no foolproof system. If you believe you have a foolproof system, you have failed to take into consideration the creativity of fools. But you can make something so difficult to manipulate and challenge. It would be like me asking you to move the Empire State Building over in 2 blocks in 2 days. And that's what you want to do when you build good security. And we don't build a lot of great security because we don't take the time to vet it. And we're going to have to do a much better job of building good security and vetting that security and make sure it does what it's supposed to do and stay at it all the time, constantly, to make sure it's doing what it does today that it was able to do yesterday.
Great insight, Frank, and that was just a perfect way to wrap things up. So I want to thank you for being here today. Amazing interview, and look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure. Thank you too.